After the ball, when the music had softened into memory and the palace lights were far behind her, Cinderella walked alone beneath the deep blue night sky. The world was quiet. Not empty, not lonely, only quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something beautiful has happened, when even the stars seem to whisper instead of shine too brightly. The road beneath Cinderella's feet was cool and pale in the moonlight. On either side of her, the trees stood still, their leaves resting gently in the night air. Far away, behind her, the palace was only a soft golden blur, like a dream slowly closing its eyes. Cinderella walked slowly. There was no need to hurry. Her gown moved lightly around her ankles. It no longer glittered as brightly as it had beneath the chandeliers, but in the moonlight it still held a faint shimmer, like silver dust resting on water. She could still hear the music in her mind, a soft melody, a gentle turn, the sound of footsteps gliding across a polished floor. She remembered the warmth of candlelight, the glow of mirrors, the feeling of being carried by music instead of walking. But now there was another kind of music, the music of the night. A leaf stirred, a small branch moved. Somewhere in the grass, a tiny creature rustled and then became still again. Cinderella breathed in slowly. The air smelled cool and clean, with a faint promise of rain. It was the smell of clouds gathering quietly, of earth waiting patiently, of flowers closing their petals for sleep. She lifted her face toward the sky. Soft clouds drifted across the moon. They did not cover it completely. They only softened it, turning its light into a gentle glow that touched the road, the trees, and Cinderella's calm face. Then the first raindrop fell. It landed lightly on her sleeve. Cinderella looked down and smiled. Another drop touched her hair. Another fell onto the dusty path, making a tiny dark circle. Then another, and another. The rain began very slowly, as if it did not want to disturb the sleeping world. It tapped on the leaves. It whispered through the branches. It touched Cinderella's shoulders with cool, delicate fingers. She did not feel troubled by it. She did not feel sad. The rain felt kind. It felt as if the sky was gently closing the evening for her, washing the brightness of the ball into something softer, quieter, and more peaceful. Ahead, through the trees, Cinderella saw a small cottage. It stood at the edge of the woods, with a low roof, a little stone chimney, and a small wooden porch. Ivy climbed one side of the wall, and the garden around it was sleeping beneath the rain. The cottage looked warm, even though no light showed from the windows. It looked patient. It looked as though it had been waiting all night for someone tired and gentle to come inside. Cinderella stepped onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked softly beneath her feet. Rain fell from the edge of the roof in thin silver lines. Behind her, the path was becoming dark and smooth. Before her, the cottage door stood quietly closed. She touched the latch. The door opened with a soft sound, and Cinderella stepped inside, carrying with her the scent of rain, moonlight, and the last quiet memory of the ball. Inside the cottage, everything was still. At first, Cinderella could see only shadows. The room was dim and quiet, filled with the gentle darkness of a place that had been resting. She closed the door softly behind her. The sound of the rain changed at once. Outside, it had been all around her, falling on leaves and stones in the path. Inside, it became softer, a gentle tapping on the roof, a whisper at the window, a distant dripping from the porch. Cinderella stood still for a moment and let her eyes grow used to the room. There was a small hearth made of old stone. Beside it lay a neat little pile of dry logs. There was a wooden table near the centre of the room, smooth and simple, with a small blue cup resting upon it. A chair with a woven seat stood nearby. A little cupboard sat against the wall. In one corner, beneath a low beam, there was a bed with a folded quilt. The cottage smelled of wood, dried herbs, cool stone, and sleep. Cinderella took one slow breath, then another. The quietness of the room settled around her like a shawl. She walked toward the hearth and knelt down. Her hands moved carefully as she placed small twigs beneath the logs. The dry wood made a faint rustling sound. She found a little spark and coaxed it gently until a thin thread of smoke rose upward. For a moment, there was only a tiny glow. Then a small flame appeared. It bent and trembled, gold and orange, soft as a whisper. Cinderella watched it carefully. The flame touched the edge of a twig, then another. Slowly, patiently, the fire grew. Soon the hearth began to crackle, not loudly, just enough to fill the cottage with a warm, friendly sound. The firelight reached across the floorboards. It touched the legs of the chair. It warmed the side of the wooden table. It climbed the walls in soft, moving shadows. Cinderella sat down near the fire. For the first time that night, she let her shoulders relax completely. She slipped off her delicate shoes and placed them side by side near the hearth. Her feet touched the soft rug beneath the chair, and she sighed quietly. It felt good to rest. It felt good to be still. The evening had been wonderful, bright and full of music. But this was wonderful too. A small room, a warm fire, rain on the roof, a silence that asked nothing from her. Cinderella looked around the cottage again, slowly this time, noticing every little thing. The table was old and smooth, with lines in the wood that looked like tiny rivers. The cupboard had a small latch, worn from many hands opening and closing it. On the shelf were 2 cups, a little bowl, and a folded cloth. Near the window, a bundle of dried lavender hung upside down from a peg. Its scent was faint, almost hidden, but when the fire warmed the room, the smell became softer and sweeter. Cinderella rose and opened the cupboard. The latch made a tiny clicking sound. Inside, she found a small kettle, a little jar of honey, and a cloth pouch filled with dried herbs. She smiled, took the kettle, and filled it with water from a pitcher by the door. She set the kettle near the fire. Then she waited. And because this was a peaceful night, waiting did not feel empty. The fire crackled, the rain tapped, the room warmed. After a little while, the water began to steam. Cinderella placed a few dried flowers and leaves into the blue cup. When she poured the hot water over them, a gentle fragrance rose into the air. Chamomile, lavender, a little mint. She wrapped both hands around the cup and sat again by the fire. The cup was warm against her fingers. She took one slow sip. The tea tasted mild and sweet, like flowers remembered by sunlight. Cinderella leaned back in the chair. Outside, rain continued falling. Inside, the cottage glowed. And for a long while, Cinderella did nothing at all. She simply sat there, breathing slowly, listening to the fire, holding the warm cup, and feeling the quiet night settle gently around her. The rain had become steadier now. It was not a storm. It did not rush against the cottage or shake the windows. It simply fell, soft and patient, as if every drop knew exactly where it belonged. Cinderella listened. There was rain on the roof, a gentle patter that came and went in waves. There was rain against the window, a light tapping sound, like tiny fingers playing a sleepy tune. There was rain falling from the edge of the porch, drop by drop, into a little puddle below. There was rain in the garden, touching leaves, bending flowers, darkening the soil. Each sound was small, but together they made a lullaby. Cinderella closed her eyes for a moment. She listened more carefully. The roof made one sound. The window made another. The leaves outside made another. The puddles made another. It was as if the whole world had become an orchestra, but a very quiet one, playing only for the night. She opened her eyes and rose slowly from the chair. With the cup still warming her hands, she walked to the window. The glass was cool beneath her fingertips. Outside, the garden was silver and blue. The path had turned dark with rain. Small puddles had gathered in the low places, and each puddle held a faint reflection of the cloudy moon. The flowers near the gate bowed gently beneath the raindrops. Leaves shone as if they had been polished by the sky. The wooden gate stood still. The trees moved only slightly. Mist rested low over the grass. Cinderella looked at it all with quiet wonder. At the ball, everything had shone brightly. Here, everything shone softly. There had been chandeliers in the palace. Here, there were raindrops on leaves. There had been music in the ballroom. Here, there was rain on the roof. There had been polished floors and golden mirrors. Here, there was wet earth, dark wood, firelight, and a little window looking out into the night. Cinderella smiled. Both kinds of beauty were real. Both were precious. She did not need one to be greater than the other. The palace had been like a dream filled with light. The cottage was like a dream filled with peace. She stayed by the window for a long time. A raindrop slid slowly down the glass. Then another followed it. Then another. The fire behind her reflected in the window, so that the flames seemed to float outside among the raindrops. Gold and silver mixed together on the glass. Cinderella watched the reflection shimmer. For a moment, it looked as though every drop of rain held a tiny piece of firelight inside it. A little golden spark, a little silver world. She breathed in. The cottage smelt different now. The air was warm from the fire, but fresh from the rain. There was wood smoke, lavender, chamomile tea, damp stone near the doorway, and the clean green scent of leaves outside. It was a simple smell, a safe smell, a resting smell. Cinderella returned to the chair and sat down again. The fire had grown steady. The flames moved slowly around the logs, sometimes rising, sometimes curling low. Every now and then, a small spark shifted inside the hearth, and a log settled with a soft sound. The rain answered. Tap, whisper, drip, patter. Cinderella's thoughts became slower. She thought of nothing she had to do, nothing she had to explain, nothing she had to understand all at once. She only thought of the rain. How many drops were falling? How many leaves were listening? Did the flowers feel comforted when the rain touched them? Was the moon still awake behind the clouds? She did not need the answers. The questions themselves were gentle enough. The rain continued. The fire continued. The cottage rested, and Cinderella rested with it.